Something wild is happening in the Love Island USA Season 7 fandom right now, and if you've been anywhere near social media lately, you already know the name that's got everyone talking, Nic Olandria. That's right, Nic and Olandria, the couple that somehow turned a regular dating show into a full-on cultural event. We're talking Ace, Taylor, Sierra, Love Island Huda, all tangled in the chaos, and somehow, months after the finale, this fandom is louder than ever. Every timeline is flooded with edits, breakdowns, conspiracy threads, and people debating the same question. Was Nic Olandria real love or just really good TV? Because at this point, no one can even agree on when their story actually started. Was it the heart kiss on night one, the Blindfold challenge, or that infamous soul ties moment that had everyone screaming at their screens?
And before we get into the wild ride that made Nic and Olandria the most talked about duo in Love Island history, let's be honest. If you're still here dissecting this mess like a detective on caffeine, you might as well hit subscribe. I drop deep dives into all the Love Island USA drama faster than Ace drops podcast hot takes, so don't miss the next one. All right, let's get into it, because the way this ship was built, tested, and practically set on fire by fans might just be the most fascinating Love Island story ever told. Let's rewind to Love Island USA Season 7, Episode 1. Before the drama, before Casa Amor, before anyone had even said the words soul ties. This was the calm before the storm, and it's exactly where the Nic Olandria legend began.
The villa doors opened, the sun was blazing, and one by one, the islanders stepped out, ready to play the world's most chaotic game of love and vibes. Among them, Nic Vansteenberghe, the goofy, charming guy who clearly didn't take himself too seriously, and Olandria Carthen, whose intro immediately made her a standout. She walked in with that confident smile, and from that moment, you could just feel something brewing. Now, what's interesting is that nobody, not even Nic, realized what kind of storyline was about to unfold. Love Island intros are always about first impressions, and Olandria's decision to go for Taylor early on looked like a safe move. Taylor was cool, calm, and the cowboy of the villa, the kind of guy producers love for a classic love triangle setup. But in true Love Island fashion, Olandria's quick, playful kiss to Nic on the heart that first night changed everything. That small moment, it was like a spark quietly catching on camera, the one that every fan would later look back on and say, that's where it started.
At that point, nobody was calling it Nic Olandria yet. The fandom was still picking sides, guessing pairings, trying to figure out who would become the villa's next it couple. But that little heart kiss instantly created a ripple. People noticed. Comments started popping up. Wait, Nic and Olandria have chemistry. I see something here. Mark my words, this duo is going to blow up. And honestly, they were right. Because that one gesture, simple, short, blink and you'll miss it, planted the seed for what would later become the biggest ship in Love Island USA history. But here's the thing about Love Island. Sparks are easy. What's hard is keeping that flame alive when the challenges, new bombshells, and public votes start flying in. And as Nic and Olandria's paths began to twist and cross, fans weren't just watching. They were building something even bigger. But that wasn't the whole story. Because while these two were barely talking in the villa, the fandom outside was already starting to form an entire movement. And that's where the Nic Olandria ship really began to sail. Here's the funny thing about Love Island USA Season 7. Sometimes the audience falls in love with a couple before the couple even knows it exists. And that's exactly what happened with Nic Olandria. By week 1, fans were already obsessed with the idea of Nic and Olandria, even though technically they weren't even together. Olandria was coupled up with Taylor, and Nic was just vibing, laughing his way through conversations, basically being everyone's funny best friend in the villa. But somehow, the chemistry between them, those quick glances, little jokes, and the are they or aren't they energy started building an entire movement online.
Before the producers even had time to cut a proper previously on Love Island segment, the internet had already formed the Nicolandria fandom. Twitter threads were full of ship names, TikTok edits were dropping every night, and fans were calling them the slow burn couple of the season. You had people saying things like, "I don't know what it is, but when Nic and Olandria are in the same frame, it just feels different." Then came the moment, the Blindfold challenge. If you've seen it, you know. That kiss wasn't just a kiss, it was a whole storyline in itself. Nic, blindfolded, confidently stepped up and chose Olandria, and the villa went crazy. Viewers online? Even crazier. That single moment basically launched the Nicolandria era. It was the spark that turned quiet fan theories into full-blown delusion, in the best way possible. Because from that point on, people stopped watching Love Island for drama, they watched for Nicolandria. Fans started analyzing body language, editing clips in slow motion, comparing smiles and reactions, and reading meaning into every single eye contact. It wasn't just a ship anymore, it was a community, and every fan wanted to be right about them being endgame.
And let's be real. Part of what made it so powerful was how subtle it all was. Nic and Olandria didn't need to say much. They didn't have to flirt loud or fake storylines. The connection was in the small things, the looks across the pool, the laughter that didn't need words, the calm comfort they had, even in chaos. Still, as the episodes rolled on, reality hit. Olandria was still coupled with Taylor. Nic was exploring other options. The Nicolandria dream seemed like it might just stay a dream. But fans? They didn't care. They doubled down. The fandom was growing so fast it was impossible to ignore. Fan edits, group chats, usernames, even merch designs started popping up. They turned a maybe connection into a full-on movement. But the villa doesn't care about fan edits, because just when it looked like Nic and Olandria were finally inching closer, Casa Amor showed up, and that's when everything flipped upside down. And what happened next? It's the moment the fandom went from hopeful to heartbroken.
If you've watched enough Love Island USA, you know what Casa Amor means: heartbreak, temptation, and chaos disguised as a fun twist. And for Nicolandria, this was the real test. At this point, Nic and Olandria were orbiting each other like two planets that kept almost colliding but never quite touching. The tension was there, the chemistry was undeniable, but then Casa Amor hit, and that's when everything they hadn't said finally came crashing down. Casa Amor is supposed to be about testing couples, but for Nic and Olandria, it was more like testing what could have been. Both of them were technically single, which meant the villa reset button had just been smashed. And what did Nic do? He walked in with that "let's see where this goes" attitude, acting like everything was chill. But the fans? The fans were panicking. They were glued to every sneak peek, every preview, every shot of Nic talking to someone new.
Meanwhile, Olandria was doing her best to play it cool too, staying collected, but you could see that spark of hesitation in her eyes. It wasn't jealousy exactly, but that quiet, "don't mess this up" energy that every Love Island fan knows too well. The kind of emotion you can't hide no matter how calm you try to look. Then came the bombshell moments. Nic's flirty energy with the new girls, Olandria's composed but visibly tense reaction, and the fandom imploding online. The hashtag Nicolandria forever started trending again, but this time with people pleading, "Nic, please don't ruin this for us." And let's not forget, Casa Amor is where alliances shift and secrets spill. Ace, Taylor, Sierra, everyone had something to say. Taylor, who had been Olandria's original pick, hinted that her focus might be elsewhere. Sierra had her own opinions flying around about Nic's choices. And Ace? Let's just say his commentary didn't exactly help cool the flames. If anything, he added lighter fluid to the fandom fire.
But here's where things got interesting.
Instead of Nic and Olandria's story dying out like so many Love Island flings do after Casa, this was where their connection deepened. The distance between them only made fans more sure there was something real. Every near miss felt like destiny trying to pull them back together. So when Casa Amor ended, viewers weren't just watching the show anymore. They were invested. They were making prediction charts, debating recoupling scenarios, and literally analyzing previews frame by frame. And sure enough, when Nic and Olandria found their way back into each other's orbit after Casa, you could tell something had shifted. They were calmer, more intentional, and way more aware of how the world was watching. But here's the catch. The villa doesn't reward subtle love stories. The loud ones get airtime. The quiet ones get ignored. Until they explode.
And that explosion, it was coming. Because after Casa Amor, Nic Olandria was no longer a background storyline. It was the storyline. Next up came the moment that made everyone choose sides. The fandom's rise, the backlash, and the endless debate over whether Nic Olandria was genuine or just perfectly edited TV magic. By the time Casa Amor wrapped, Nic Olandria wasn't just a pairing, it was a phenomenon. The villa might have been full of tanning oil and drama, but outside of it, the internet was on fire. You couldn't open TikTok, Twitter, or even YouTube without seeing a Nic Olandria edit on your feed. Slow-motion clips of the Blindfold kiss, dramatic voiceovers saying they were written in the stars, fan accounts spamming justice for Nic and Olandria. It wasn't just a fan base, it was a movement, and it had its own culture, inside jokes, and rival factions.
Every little moment from the villa was being dissected frame by frame. If Nic so much as glanced at Olandria during a group challenge, there were 10 tweets about it before the episode even ended. Fans were comparing the way he laughed with her versus how he laughed with anyone else. They were building theories about editing cuts, background music cues, even who producers were trying to push as the main couple. And honestly, they weren't wrong to question it. Love Island production has always known how to shape a narrative, and it didn't take long for rumors to swirl that the editing team was playing favorites, maybe even downplaying Nic Olandria to make other couples shine. That theory alone gave the fandom even more fuel, because if the show wasn't giving them the story they wanted, fans decided they'd tell it themselves. Soon, the hashtag Nic Olandria tag wasn't just trending, it was dominating. People were writing essays on Reddit, making reaction videos on YouTube, and turning simple glances into cinematic masterpieces. It got to the point where even cast members like Ace and Taylor couldn't escape questions about them in interviews. And of course, that only stirred more drama. Taylor's subtle comments, Ace's awkward podcast quotes, even Sierra's event appearances, all of it was suddenly linked back to Nic Olandria. Every word, every emoji, every repost became proof of something. The fandom had built an entire shared universe out of small, maybe meaningless moments, and it was working. Nic Olandria had become the heartbeat of Love Island USA Season 7. And here's what made it so fascinating. The relationship wasn't even official yet. There was no label, no title, no confirmation. But fans didn't care. They were manifesting it into existence. They treated every micro-interaction like a promise, every silence like tension, and every episode like scripture. It wasn't just shipping, it was storytelling. And in a weird way, Nic Olandria stopped being just about Nic and Olandria. It became about what fans wanted love to look like. A slow burn, full of tension, with the kind of chemistry that didn't need words. But when fans create the fairy tale, reality eventually bites back. Because the closer Nic and Olandria got to the finale, the louder the questions became. Was this connection genuine, or were they just playing along because the internet had already crowned them the villa's power couple? And that brings us to the most pivotal moment of their entire journey, the finale.
The night that made Nic Olandria immortal in the fandom, but also split it in half forever. When the Love Island USA Season 7 finale finally rolled around, it felt less like a reality show ending and more like the Super Bowl for shippers. Every Nic Olandria fan had their snacks ready, group chats blowing up, hearts racing, and predictions flying. Would Nic and Olandria finally claim the crown, or was production setting them up for one last heartbreak?
They walked into that finale with an energy that was calm but electric. The kind of quiet confidence that said, we made it, whether we win or not. They weren't the loudest couple. They didn't spend the entire season wrapped up in villa theatrics. But what they did have was chemistry that never needed a speech. It was the look across the fire pit, the soft laughs, the way they seemed at peace in a show built on chaos. When the results dropped and Nic Olandria finished as runners-up, the fandom exploded. Half the viewers were celebrating how far they'd come, the other half was ready to storm the Love Island offices demanding a recount. Twitter threads, TikToks, memes, all declaring one thing: they were robbed. But here's where the story got even better, because the finale wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the real Nic Olandria era. The minute they left the villa, Nic and Olandria proved that what they had wasn't just for cameras. They showed up together at events, went live, joked with fans, and supported each other in ways that screamed, "This is real." Interviews started dropping left and right. Reporters kept asking the same question: are Nic and Olandria still together? And instead of dodging, they gave the kind of answer that said everything without confirming anything. Nic laughed and said, "We know what we have." Olandria added, "We're good, really good." That one line, "we know what we have," became the new Nic Olandria motto. It was cryptic, confident, and full of that mystery that kept fans hooked. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was the perfect tease, just enough to keep the entire fandom guessing and watching. Meanwhile, post-Villa drama was still simmering. Ace had opinions, Taylor was doing his subtle interviews, Cierra was posting captions that fans immediately tried to decode. Every small move became fuel for another round of speculation. But through all the noise, Nic and Olandria stayed calm. While other Islanders jumped into new controversies, they leaned into subtlety. And it worked. Their silence became their statement. Fans started saying, they don't need to prove it, you can just tell. So when they showed up together, weeks later, at events, on streams, laughing, vibing, it felt like full circle redemption. They didn't need the prize money or the title. The real win was how they managed to make a dating show love story feel authentic in a world where everything is edited to perfection. But of course, in true Nic Olandria fashion, even victory came with a side of chaos. Because while most fans were celebrating, a new conversation was about to begin. One that would question everything about reality TV, authenticity, and the thin line between what's real and what's just really good storytelling. And that's where things got complicated, when the fairy tale met the fandom's expectations head-on. Now, here's where the Nic Olandria story stopped being a cute Love Island fairy tale and started turning into something much deeper and way messier. Because the moment the cameras stopped rolling, everyone suddenly had something to say. Let's start with the villa fallout. Once the season ended, clips began resurfacing. Interviews, behind-the-scenes footage, fan-recorded lives, and it didn't take long before whispers turned into full-blown theories. Some fans insisted Nic Olandria was realer than any other couple that season. Others claimed the entire storyline had been guided by production, pointing to certain editing cuts, background music, and conveniently timed zoom-ins that made their chemistry seem cinematic. Then came the outside noise. Cierra, Nic's former partner before the Nic Olandria spark truly ignited, made comments online that had the fandom side-eyeing everything. She didn't mention names directly, but the subtext was clear.
Fans started dissecting her captions like FBI agents with too much free time, trying to decode whether she was shading Nic, Olandria, or both. Meanwhile, Ace, never one to miss a microphone, jumped on his podcast to drop a few cryptic remarks about fake relationships and camera couples. He didn't say Nic Olandria by name, but he didn't have to. The fandom connected the dots faster than anyone could blink. And here's the thing. None of that actually hurt Nic Olandria. If anything, it made them even more iconic. Because while everyone else was online spilling, subtweeting, and starting mini-wars, Nic and Olandria said nothing. They kept it quiet, calm, and classy. And that silence spoke louder than any podcast could. But the controversy didn't stop there. Even the media joined in. Articles questioned whether Nic Olandria had been too perfect. Some journalists claimed their calm energy was proof they were playing it safe to protect their image. Others argued it was the exact opposite, that their ability to stay grounded in chaos proved their connection was real. Either way, everyone was talking, and the couple stayed trending long after the finale hype should have faded.
Behind the drama, though, there was something undeniably human about Nic Olandria's journey. They represented something rare in reality TV. A love story that didn't rely on screaming matches or dramatic betrayals to keep viewers hooked. It was about patience, timing, and the slow realization that real chemistry doesn't always need fireworks. Sometimes it's the quiet spark that lasts the longest. And maybe that's why they've lasted beyond the villa, at least in people's hearts. Because Nic Olandria wasn't just a couple, it was an idea. A reminder that not every connection needs to be loud to be strong, and not every showmance has to fall apart once the credits roll. But here's the final twist. Nic Olandria also changed how fans watch Love Island itself. It showed that audiences don't just want drama anymore. They want depth. They want to feel something real, even in the middle of a dating show built on chaos and cameras. So, whether you believe Nic Olandria was destiny or just the perfect storm of editing and chemistry, one thing's for sure. They left a mark that no other couple from Season 7 can touch.
And if you've made it this far, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button before I start another 30-minute breakdown about Ace's next podcast meltdown. Seriously, go on. It's free, it's fast, and it keeps you from missing the next Love Island deep dive you didn't know you needed. Because the Nic Olandria story might have ended in the villa, but in the fandom, it's still just getting started. And that's the wild story of Nic Olandria. From that heart kiss on night 1 to the chaos of Casa Amor. From blindfolds to finales. From fan edits to endless theories. Whether you think they were soulmates or the smoothest storyline in Love Island USA history, one thing's certain. Nic and Olandria didn't just play the game, they became the game. So here's my question to you. When did you officially join the Nic Olandria ship? Was it the blindfold kiss, the soul ties moment, or the post-villa lives that broke the internet? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how delusional we all got together. And if you made it all the way to the end of this breakdown, you deserve a crown, or at least a subscribe button. So go ahead, smash that subscribe, turn on the bell, and join the family before Ace drops another podcast hot take we have to unpack for 20 minutes straight. Thanks for watching, thanks for vibing, and remember, in the world of Love Island Season 7, the drama never ends. It just takes a break between uploads. Catch you in the next one.